So this week we welcome Sarah to the Love Life podcast. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, good morning.
So Sarah's here to share her story, and it's a good one. And she's going to share her tips and how she's gone from being a very scared flyer to being somewhere very different now. And so we're looking forward to this. So welcome. So tell us about yourself, Sarah. Where you live, your background, how your story started.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you, Paul, so much for having me on the podcast. But thank you for what you do and the work that you do. I feel like is so important, and I know has helped me personally, but has helped countless other people be able to, work through and beyond this fear. So thank you for that.
No, there's a team. There's a team.
um, but yeah, so I mean, I live in Ohio, so I live in the US. I know you guys are UK based, but
Mm.
um, live in Ohio, lived here most of my life. Before that, lived in Illinois, but I am in the medical field. I work as a nurse practitioner. I have three sons, live with my husband, Aaron, who's in the Air Force, no stranger to flying. He's flown all over the world, all over the country, um, lived with me for over a decade, driving me up to 20 some hours while I refuse to fly. So he's been a trooper. Yeah, well, he never complained, so we'll give him credit where it's due.
Yeah. So I know in the States, everywhere is a hell of a drive, isn't it? But you are more likely to be able to do that because you've got good road system and stuff. But still, it's a hell of a schlep to get around some of these places. So, okay, so that's a nice little back. So tell us a little bit about where the fear started,
Yeah,
what the impact upon you having the fear was.
sure. So, um, I flew a fair amount as a child, with my parents. I don't have any like specific memories of anything bad about that. At one point, my parents separated, lived in separate states. So my dad lived in Illinois, mom lived in Ohio. So briefly there was some flying back and forth, and my sister and I as unaccompanied minors. I think we only did that a couple of times, but
Yeah.
again, I don't recall that being problematic. We eventually moved to Ohio too, and after that, kind of just didn't really fly very much anymore. Just lack of opportunity, and those kind of things. So I think there was like just a long period of time growing up after that there wasn't really a lot of exposure. And um into like adolescence, teenage, young adulthood, I generally speaking kind of just became a anxious person in general and had developed anxieties and fears to some other things like elevators, which actually I think is sort of a common crossover for some people who are afraid of flying. And I don't know if there's like, the connection with like enclosed spaces, lack of control, that kind of thing. But and so I started to get the idea that like flying might be scary to me, but again, didn't really have like it wasn't like I was faced with the opportunity to do it really because I wasn't going anywhere. So it didn't really come up a lot. Um, and then when I was around, I was probably about 18 years old. I had a friend that was living in Florida and got invited to go down there.
That's a
And
good friend to have, isn't it? Let's be honest. If you're gonna have a friend
yeah,
from there,
sure.
Florida,
Yeah.
California, either will do, Like,
Yeah. Somewhere beautiful, right? So I thought to myself at the time, uh, even though I knew it sounded kind of scary, I thought, well, I don't really have a good reason to be afraid. I haven't flown in so long that I don't even really like remember exactly what it was like. I'm probably just being silly. I'm just going to do it. And so my first mistake was probably that I went alone. So I flew alone to Florida and there was a connecting flight. A friend of mine dropped me off at the airport. I knew I was afraid on the way there, but, you know, didn't, I guess, really realize the extent of how afraid I was. until I get to the airport. I get checked in, I'm at the gate. It's like time for me to get on the airplane. I'm, boarding the aircraft, and it's like panic. And I had never really experienced a panic attack before that.
Mm.
And it
Do
lasted.
you know what the trigger was then, or what your thought process was going on at that time?
I have to be honest, I don't. I mean, that was a good 17 years ago, so I couldn't tell you. I could be more specific about my thought process on the recent flights.
Okay.
Uh, but back then, I think it was just kind of like probably an overwhelming sensation of, unfamiliar noises and sounds. And, I'm going to be in loss of control. They just probably all love it. Um, and I kind of panicked the whole way there. And so that was fun. And as I recall, nobody really noticed or bothered to care. And now, I mean, it's not the responsibility of strangers to take care of me on an airplane. I get that. But um it was very scary to feel like, I'm with all of these people. I'm clearly not doing well. And, you know, there just wasn't a lot of support there. So, anyways, so I get there, I have a nice time. Inevitably, I must return.
Yes.
So, on the way home, I did it, okay on the first connecting flight. The second flight, we come home. It's Ohio, it's in the winter, terrible snowstorm. And so we're flying back through that. Now, my recollection of it as the young, most anxious version of myself that I've ever been is that it
Mm.
was awful. It was horrible. It was terrible. I was certain I was going to die. Like, in hindsight now, knowing things I know, I'm like, could it be possible that it wasn't that bad and that, my anxiety and panic, you know, exacerbated the situation and the memory of it? Absolutely. But that's the memory that I have to share with you. So that is, and I swore off. I was like, I will never get on an airplane again. I like cried the whole way. And it was just, it was very scary to me. And I just didn't feel safe and, all of those things. And so it ultimately felt like I had this, oh, I'm so brave. I'm going to face my fear and get on this airplane and go to Florida. And it felt like this huge failure. And it felt like I just did horrible. And I really truly didn't think I could do it again. So I was like, I'm never going to fly again. That's the best solution to this is I'm not going to even attempt it again because that was just, I don't ever want to feel like that again. And so I didn't, I was 18 then. I'm 35 now. And so not too long after that, I met my now husband, who I mentioned is in the Air Force. He was in the Air Force when I met him. Um, and of course, at some point, we had the conversation and I'm like, listen, I won't get on an airplane. I won't do it. And
How early into the relationship do you is this one of those things that you have to sort of pick your moment? I've never thought about this before. Like when you meet someone, I've got something to tell you. Oh, what you married? No, what is it?
well, I think when you have somebody that flies freely, like, well, and also generally speaking, like nothing could make him anxious at all, I don't think. So we're just, he balances me out very well in that way. But um I think I just recognize that like anybody who would be with me would need to know that, right? Like that's kind of a big deal. If you're going to spend your life with somebody, they have to kind of like be in agreement that like, because at the time I was hard and fast. Like I will never even think about facing my fear. Don't you dare ask me to do that.
This wasn't the first date conversation, and this is all right. Okay, this is getting serious, but I need to fess up.
He probably had an idea early on. I don't know. I'd have to ask him because I don't even remember now how early into the relationship it was. But yeah, we did have the conversation, and he was always very accepting of it. Like I said, he drove me like 23 hours to somewhere that would have taken us like 2 hours on an airplane. Didn't complain. And so we went on like that for a good while. Um, we have three sons. Our oldest son is he's a freshman in college, so he's I adopted him. He's Aaron's son that I adopted after we got married, and then we had two more. And then I've worked in the emergency department for a long time, and then COVID happened, and you just start to sort of like look at life a little different, and you go, life is really short.
Mm.
Do I want to keep missing out on things? Where I would think about things like, our oldest son, I'm like, he's getting older. If I continue to refuse to fly, he'll inevitably go on and have that experience. I won't be there to have it with them. Or, what if they go and live somewhere else across the country or across the world? What am I going to do? Sit here and not visit them? Or, there's a million places I'd love to go see in the world, or to travel with my husband, or, all of these things that I would love to do. Or what if my, relative has an emergency and I can't get to them and, 3 states away, just kind of like makes you sort of start to like take an inventory of like things that matter. Um, so it was like around the time that we were emerging from COVID lockdowns and things like that, that travel was starting to happen again, that I decided that I wanted.
Can I just so I just gonna there's a pause for a moment there, because I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? That particularly with your role, that what you would have seen during the pandemic has probably could have sent you one of several ways, couldn't it? Because you could have like got more fearful, thinking, "Crikey, like life's so fragile. I'm not going to risk it." Yeah, it sounds like it sent you the other way. Like plus with the eldest son as well. There's a couple of reasons, that some good reasons to think, no, I've got to do something about this.
Yeah.
Because I think the motivation is always really interesting to me.
Yeah, I think I have grown a lot as a person in my anxieties. So, I mentioned that I was a very anxiously wired person in my, kind of young adult years. And I think that I just sort of get to this point with, all of those things with the pandemic and all the stuff, that it's just kind of like, I could either sit around and be anxious about what could be, or I could live my life, and I can't tell you that I'm never anxious about anything, because, my family would tell you that's just not true. But, I really try to manage that as best I can. But, yeah, so that's sort of what inspired me. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to try again to face this. So I thought, well, I need a plan. I need a better plan than just show up and do it, right? Because that didn't go so well the first time.
No.
So my plan was this. I was like, okay, first of all, I need to go somewhere that I'll be really excited about, that I really want to go, and like that'll help temper some of the anxiety.
Mm.
And it needs to be somewhere that we can fly to. But if I do terrible, we can bail and my husband can drive me home.
Okay. Yeah. So that sounds quite sensible. Like it's a bit of an experiment risk. Yeah.
Yeah. It sort of like gave me like a little bit of like a toe in the water feeling, where I was like,
Mm.
I could do it, but if I needed to not do it, because if you leave and you fly over, the ocean, and it doesn't go so well,
It's a bit more tricky. Yeah.
yeah, what are you gonna do? Take a boat back? I mean, he's patient. I don't know if he's that patient, but um, so always wanted to go to the Caribbean, and it's something that I've said I will never be able to do that unless I go on like a cruise or something, I guess, but because of my fear of flying. So I said, how close can I get without leaving the country? So we settled on Key West. So
Nice.
it ended up being for our wedding anniversary. Aaron and I went to Key West. And so in trying to prepare for that flight, now this was actually before I had found Love Fly, but tried to get familiar with, processes of flying and different things like that, different anxiety, you know, just ways of coping, breathing techniques, that kind of stuff. And we went to the airport that day. I mean, you would have thought I was going to my own funeral. I was just a mess, beside myself. It, so,
Sorry to laugh. That's just
no, I'm laughing with you. It was, I know, it was, you would have, I mean, just, it was, I like the night before, we're dropping our kids off at their aunt's house and I'm like crying and I'm like saying goodbye. And,
paying a proper goodbye. Yeah,
yeah,
always
but,
liked you.
yes. But,
Avoided.
yeah. So we walk into the airport and we sort of stopped there. We hadn't got in to like check in and like, gone through security yet, but my husband sort of stops and he looks at me. And I feel like this was a really important moment for me. He goes, "We don't have to do this if you don't want to."
Mm.
And I felt like that was really important because
Oh, hang on a
sometimes
sec. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
it was a good thing.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So it was a good thing because I feel like, at least for me, like in that moment, I was so scared that I was almost like, I was almost like ready to like bail on my own. Like I was ready to just turn and leave. But then like when he verbalized that to me, I was like, oh, he'd be okay with it if we left and he wouldn't be mad at me. I could really leave right now, but I don't want to because I'm here for me. I'm here for a reason. There's work to be done.
Yeah.
And there's only one way to do that. And it's through it. I got to go. I got to do this.
Yeah.
So we go in, but we go in and we're checking in, and every moment just feels like, I'm putting my stuff in for security, and it just, oh gosh, I just remember everything feeling so, just deeply, just terrifying. I was so scared, and now I'm, just,
So remind me, how long ago was this?
it's been 3 years, 3.5 years.
The US trip was 3.5 years.
2021 was, yeah, spring of 2021. So,
Yeah.
and so we got to the gate, we got on the flight, all the good stuff. And I think I definitely had like a, oh crap moment when I'm on the plane, like, oh, I'm really going to do this. And then we took off, and it, it was interesting because the parts of it that I thought would bother me, that I spent so much time ruminating on leading up to it, was not really the parts that bothered me. Like in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm really going to not like being at 37,000 feet. That's going to bother me a lot. When in reality, it was like the takeoff. I was like, all the sensations and sounds and things like that bothered me more. And once we were at cruising altitude, I did really well. Um, but all in all, I did much better. Of course, I had support. I was a little more prepared. Did much better than, the time when I flew alone when I was 18. And so we had a lovely trip. Flew back. I did okay. Every time I flew after that.
Second, just don't skip over that. You flew there, you flew back, and you said, I just did okay. I mean, let's be honest, the amount of gap you'd had from that flight and the one before, I think you did more than okay. Is that fair? I think, yeah. People always beat themselves up. They will kind of go, yeah, I wasn't perfect though. I was just, but you did it. Yeah. Did that all yourself.
Yeah. I will say, like, the moment that we landed at the airport in Miami on that first flight is a feeling that I really can't compare anything to. To just feel like I did it. I showed up, I did it.
Yep.
And I can keep doing it. This thing that has like, hovered over me for so long and that I have avoided. I mean, I would see an airplane in the sky and it would make me nervous. And to think that I got on one and I landed with it was, just the biggest, most wonderful accomplishment in the world. So
Yeah. I mean, you said I did it and I could do it again. I just love that. So something changed, wasn't it? So something has changed in you in the way that you see it. And this is before you even found us. So that's
Yes.
remarkable.
Yes. So, um, when we flew back, one thing I did find on the flight back that I wasn't prepared for was there's, you like if you when you take off and you turn, there's like the banking of the airplane. Didn't really know that that was a thing, and
I dare you turn.
no, how dare you not fly completely straight? But so that's a thing I've had to work on over the course of this. But
But they keep turning. I've noticed they do that all every time.
I know they keep doing it. But so that after we got back, actually, my husband is the one. He's a big podcast guy, and he's the one that stumbled upon your podcast and was like, "Hey, you should check this out." And so I started listening and um, really kind of delving into some of that because I knew immediately that I had to keep flying.
Hmm.
I knew that if I didn't, that
That's
I wouldn't
interesting.
continue to make progress. That I would.
You know that about yourself.
Um, well, I guess I just assumed it based on what happened when I avoided it the last time. It just grew and grew and grew,
Right.
and I didn't want to go back there. I knew that that didn't align with my goal for myself, and so even though I was like still afraid because I was still afraid, I did it, but it was scary, and, but I knew I wanted to do it again. And,
So just so to be clear, Sarah, before you tell us about the next bit. So when you first started, you were talking about, you had the thing with lifts and all the rest of it. So I get the sense then that part of the fear is about being claustrophobic, being trapped, those sort of things as well, not being in control. You've got this thing about the movement as well. So I'm just trying to understand, kind of what the things were, and then what's different now.
so I think it's a lot of that. Yes. Being in an enclosed space and trapped and not in control. And also just sort of this idea in my mind that was like not able to accept the whole concept. How could this humongous heavy plane carrying all of these people, you know,
That.
go so high, so fast, and get us there so safe? That doesn't make any sense to me logically, right? Actually, I said that to a friend one time as we're talking about my fear of flying. I said, how could you not be afraid to get in this metal tube and fly, 500 miles an hour, 30,000 feet above the earth? And she was like, well, that's what they're made to do. And I was like, well, I'm done talking to you because you can't relate to my fear. So, but, I just thought she was like, well, that's what they're made to do. Well, okay. But yeah, it's all of that, for me. Yeah. And then as an anxious person who, we really love to anticipate other things we'll be anxious about.
Of course.
So like I said, I'm like,
You should never limit yourself to just a few things.
exactly. You should assume you'll be anxious about 12 other things as well. But, I assumed I'll be anxious about how high we're flying. I would do things like look at flight radar and look at my flight that I was on and see that it's planned at 37,000 feet and be like, well, why can't they fly at 35,000 feet? And now in hindsight, I'm like, well, what kind of sense does that make? What do I know about altitudes and why would that make me feel better? Because it feels like something that I can barter with them. I don't know, makes zero sense. Same thing when I check in at the airport or at the, or at my gate. It used to bother me a lot when they would go, this is a really full flight. And now I'm just like, well, of course it is. They're all, most of them are full. They want to sell the tickets and then we get the people there. But now I'm like, well, why would that have bothered me? What difference does it make if the flight is full or not? Would it make me feel safer if there was less people on the flight? It doesn't make a difference. Like, the plane will get there no matter how many people are on it. if I checked in at the gate and she said, this is a really light flight, I'd probably be concerned. I'd be like, I wish this flight was really full. Just having an internal battle.
Yes. So basically, you're just quite contrary. Whatever they say,
That's right.
it's bad. Yeah. Okay.
Everything's a catastrophe when you're terrified, I guess.
Look, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes when people listen, if this is the first podcast you listen to, you think, "Oh my God, he's giving her a roasting." I'm not. The thing is, one of the things I always know this about, and I say that I'm just going to repeat it for you, but also for anybody who's listening, is that nervous flyers are normal people. They just get themselves into sort of patterns. And one of the great things about being a human is that we can step back and go, why am I doing that? That's like you're doing. Like, why are you flying at 39 when you should be at 37? I'm not happy about that.
Yeah.
Why is it a full flight and why is it not a lighter flight? Why
Yeah.
is it a light flight and not a full flight? This is what we do as humans. We say stuff. Yeah. And even as we say it, we know, like, why am I saying that? But we still say it. So it's really just to give ourselves permission to kind of go, to hold it lightly rather than kind of go, put the spirit flying. Worst thing ever. Well, its impact can be, but it's just a fear.
Yes, definitely.
Patterns, behaviors can be amended as you are proving.
Yes.
Aren't they?
Yes. So, like I said, I knew at that point, I was like, I need to keep flying. The next plan was, I wanted to fly with my kids. And so we planned a family vacation for the next year, also to Florida. And in that time, spent a lot of time on Love Fly. Really, really love Pete Higgins. I adore him. Episode 44 has really, I feel like, seen me through. No, that's you. Episode 44 is you.
Sorry about that.
No. I appreciate you on episode 44. I'm thinking of the checklist for him. I appreciate both of you. But and then there's one that he had that you guys had done an episode that was like, oh crap, I'm flying, like,
Episode 130.
Yes, that's a really good one that I've listened to a few times, and his section is that, and he's just like, go for it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go for it.
Yeah, but he's if he could bottle his enthusiasm, well, it'd be sellable. And maybe as a cologne, you could squirt it on. He just loves it. And so episode 130, as I would say, good credit to Peter. That was her idea, And I think that was a very very positive episode and quite a long one, but people have said it's quite helpful because it is that like, well, literally I'm flying in the next couple of days. I'm glad it was useful.
Yes, definitely. But so I feel like a lot of progress happened in between kind of those two flying experiences, the initial flight and then when we flew with the kids. We were
so just rewind a little bit. So
yep.
You listen to the podcast. 2 questions. Did you do them in a particular order? Did you do all of them? Generally, like, what was your approach to that? And secondly, were you doing anything else to supplement what you're doing with us?
Okay, so I didn't listen to them I initially was listening to them in order, and then I started to sort of go through and cherry pick things that I felt like applied a little bit more to, me, or like things that I felt like would be helpful for me personally. And so that approach worked fine for me. And in terms of other things I've done, like journaling or like my own like cognitive behavioral like workbook type things, I didn't have a therapist through this time. I do have one now. Hi, Kelsey, if you listen to this. Would highly recommend to all trying to work through this. I think that would be, definitely helpful. But yeah, so
just one last question then about the podcast. So was there any particular episodes that you would say or speakers who obviously the one with Pete Higgins, you liked episode 44, you liked episode 130. Were there any others that sort of that you would say your go-to ones are?
Yeah, so I don't remember them by number. There's an episode about turbulence. Um, super helpful in my opinion.
That was Steve, Captain Steve, that one?
Yes, yes. That really, really helped me. I feel like understand and feel good about how safe I am, provided I have my seatbelt on, during turbulence. That's a big one for me. And generally speaking, I love all of the episodes that you're speaking to anybody who works in the aircraft, pilots, flight attendants. For me, that's a big focus point. You know, because I understand that I have to kind of like let go of control and relinquish my trust to them.
Yeah.
So, a lot of those were super helpful, but yeah, definitely the turbulence one. And then the other ones that I mentioned were probably my favorites.
Okay, thank you. Right, so carry on. So you experienced a difference as you were working on these. So so continue the story.
Yes. So, leading up to all of this, over the years, I would have, even before I faced my fear of flying, I guess, I would have random airplane dreams and like, I don't know that I would call them like nightmares, but they weren't pleasant, but dreams about flying. And then like, during this period of time that I'm facing my fear, I'm having dreams as we're leading up to flying. And they often feel a little nervous or whatever. As things kind of go along, I'm noticing that they feel less scary, or if I'm watching, like I did a lot of like, would get on, I guess this goes back to like, what am I doing to work on things? I didn't really think of it, but I would get on and like just Google things like video of airplane taking off from inside and just watch it over and over and just desensitize myself to like the view from the window as I leave the ground, the view from inside the cabin, all of those things that felt overwhelming to my senses before that I needed to kind of normalize. And so doing some of those things was helpful too. But so we took the kids on the flight, and I was nervous about that because I didn't want to fall apart in front of them. And I didn't want to pass off any fear. Our oldest son, I didn't have concerns. I knew he wouldn't, inherit my fear. I knew that he understood and was not afraid. My middle son, I worried about just because he's a lot more like sensitive and can be,
Yeah.
He can just be more like me in that way sometimes. And he had made the comment like, at certain points maybe he was a little nervous. My youngest one, yeah, was totally fine. And it was his birthday actually that we flew, so he was excited about that. But they all did really well, and they didn't have any concerns. I did fine. We strategically sit me with, one kid that we know isn't going to care. And now, like, it doesn't matter as much now, but, at the time I was like, okay, who should I sit by in case but they did really well. I did really well. I mean, even at that time, still very afraid, but I think at this point, the anticipatory anxiety is the worst part. Once I get on the plane and we get moving and we get in the air, we get on our way, like I do pretty darn good by this point.
Yeah.
And so we did well on the way down. It was a direct flight. Did fine. Same thing with the trip back, except then I don't remember if it was this trip or it might have been the next trip. One of the trips, we unexpectedly had like a change in our flight from a direct flight to, a connection. And that was upsetting. I feel like I was still just wasn't quite there yet. And so when the plans change, that upsets me. And it was 2 takeoffs, 2 landings. So that was still a little hard for me. So, kind of felt like a lot. But overall, I mean, just the pattern was that you could see progress every time.
Mm.
And so took a trip with my husband and 2 of our friends, and they actually used to be afraid of flying, both of them, and have now flown all over the world. And so, like, we get to the airport and they're checking in on me to make sure I'm okay, and did good on that trip. And so, like, I'm like, leave me go, like, I'm doing really good. And so at that point, I think we had flown maybe a total of like, maybe like, and I count every flight. Like, I don't care if it's one trip. If I flew 4 times, that counts.
Yeah.
So we had flown about 10 times since I decided to face my fear at this point. And I said, okay, like, I'm doing it. I'm doing it well. It's getting better, and like, every trip I'm making progress. I want to go to the Caribbean. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So we booked a trip to the Bahamas.
So when's this for now? So about to bring you up to date.
We just went
Ah.
last month.
Oh.
And so we took the kids. Yep. June 24, we went to Nassau. So it was my husband, our kids, and then our oldest son actually brought one of his friends along too. But so we went to the airport in the morning. Our flight was supposed to leave super early, 6:30 a.m. And so, we got all the kids up and in the car. It's like 3:30, and we live about an hour from the airport. So we're getting there, we're getting checked in, and as we're doing that, which, by the way, my one son's his name is Benjamin, but we call him Ben. And so, never having left the country because I've always been too afraid to fly, on his passport, of course, it says Benjamin, but on his plane ticket, I put Ben. And so it would not accept, me at this. And so I'm already like, it's only 4:30 in the morning and I'm already, like, this can't happen, and my husband's like, it's okay. Like, we can fix this.
You didn't take it as a sign then?
I did not. No, I actually was worried then that we were going to miss our flight, because I was like, well, we're going to have to fix this. And I'm worried we're going to miss our flight because our connection was short. We were supposed to fly Columbus to DC to Nassau, but our connection was like, we had an hour to get on the plane once we landed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we're checking in, super lovely lady, her name was Joy, actually, at American Airlines check-in desk, is helping us try to get that figured out. We're getting text messages on our phones that say that our first flight has been delayed. So from 6:30 takeoff time, we're now taking off at 9 o'clock. Well, we're not going to make our connection in DC. So now I'm like, okay. I'm really like, trying to keep it together. I'm like, my dream trip is going down the drain. But, my husband, your calming spirit, it's okay. We're going to be okay. And then Joy, bless her, very calming, lovely spirit. She was like, it's going to be okay. Well, we'll get you there, got us rescheduled onto a different route. So now we're going Columbus to DC, DC to Miami, Miami to Nassau.
Oh,
and so
chucked in an extra 2 flights. Crikey.
Yeah. So I've had a little bit of a brief moment where I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. Just for a moment, And then I was like, well, yeah, I can. I know that I can do that. I've proven that I can do that. Like, this is going to be okay. Like, we'll be okay. So just kind of like tried to take a deep breath. We got the ticket thing figured out. She fixed it. Got through security, went to get breakfast, and just kind of like, had some time to kill because we're at the airport super early and now we're not leaving till 9. So after that, we went to the gate and just, do what you do. You wait for your plane at the gate. So I go into the bathroom that is by our gate, and I can hear the person in the stall next to me very upset, just out of respect for them. I wouldn't repeat anything they were saying, but, obviously struggling, having it, probably panicking, not doing well. I could devise a few things for what deduce a few things for what she's saying, like that has never flown or hasn't flown in a really long time. I can tell she's probably flying alone. And then I hear her say, if they wouldn't have delayed my flight, I'd be in DC by now. And I'm like, okay, universe, I hear you. I see you. I understand the assignment, So I'm like waiting. I'm like, I don't want to leave the bathroom without at least offering to, to at least maybe just talk or, whatever. I mean, of course, could decline that if she wanted to. So I just kind of washed my hands and tried to kind of mind my own business as much as I could. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop on her conversation, but I also didn't know what she looked like. So I, wanted to catch her when she came out. And so she comes out of the stall and I'm like, hey, hi, I'm sorry. I know this is really weird. But I couldn't help but overhear you. I just wanted you to know that, like, I'm also a fearful flyer. I used to feel just like you feel. Are you traveling alone? And she said, yes, I'm traveling alone. And I said, okay. I said, well, my name is Sarah. I'm traveling with my family. I think you're on my flight. I heard you say you're Mr. Flight to DC. I think you're on our flight. And she said, oh, yeah, I am, and she told me her name. And I said, okay. I said, well, I said, I just want you to know that, like, everything's going to be okay. And if you want, you're more than welcome to come and sit with me and my family, at the gate, or, we can talk or whatever you want, no pressure. You don't have to, but you are welcome to come sit with us if you want to.
Amazing.
And so she did accept me on this offer. So, of course, here I come from the bathroom. My family's all like on their iPads and stuff. And I'm like, this is my new friend. But they get me. So they're just like, okay, So we sat down and I shared the flying or the checklist with her and a few other things that I could quickly kind of pull up that I knew I had available. Told her about the podcast and stuff and just talked to her about some things that I thought would be helpful to her, like on the flight. So, like, we were like in the middle of the plane. I think our row was like 14 or something like that. And her seat was like in the back. And so we're sitting there and we're talking, and just also getting to know each other. What do you do? Where are you going? That kind of thing. And then as we're sitting there, the gate ticket agent calls her up to the desk. And of course, instant panic on her face. Why are they calling me up to the desk? What's happening? And I'm like, it's okay. Just go see what they need. So she goes up there and she comes back and they're like, they just moved my seat. So they moved her seat to like 2 or 3 rows in front of me. And I'm like, okay, no big deal. They just moved you. That's fine. So we talked a little bit more. Then we boarded the plane. We're like, getting everything ready. And so it's like a 3 and 3 plane. So 3 seats, 3 seats. And then the way we divide our family up is usually kind of weird just because we have an odd number of people. So my husband and my one son are like behind us, and then the other son's like behind us, and then like me and my middle son are like, here. So like, and then everybody settles in, and then there's a seat right next to me. It is open. And so I'm like, hey, look, the seat is open. And she was like, oh, do you think they'll let me sit there? And I was like, I don't know. So I grabbed the flight attendant and I'm like, can my friend sit here? And she was like, no, we can't move anybody for weight and balance. And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, it's okay, And so, but then like 2 minutes later, she moved her. So she moves her there. And, so we're sitting there and we're like waiting and we got like to taxi and stuff. And then, we just kind of like, I held her hand and we made it through it. Like, it was a short flight. It was like an hour flight from Columbus to DC. But like, we held hands until we were kind of like up into like a more stable altitude, and then like made sure she was like settled. I'm like, are you okay? I like checked on her a few times and like, she did really well. And then we got off the plane and then she was like, thank you so much. Like, I really appreciate it. Oh. I did talk to her a few times after that. Did exchange phone numbers and stuff, but I just
what difference you made. You're like her own little pocket angel.
I just, well, I just, like, first of all, there's no way, like, there's just no way it's a coincidence that they moved her seat up to where I could talk to her enough to be like, the seat is open. The seat just happens to be open. Just that stuff, just like these things just keep happening to just tell me that like I'm on the right track and just to keep going. And I wish that when I was 18 and I was on the airplane and I was terrified and falling apart, I wish somebody would have just held my hand and said, it's going to be okay. And maybe I wouldn't have missed out on over 10 years of whatever I missed out on. I don't know. But, it just takes a little bit of kindness and just to tell somebody like you understand, like you've been there, you're not alone, it's gonna be okay, and you can do this. And it felt really good to be able to like help somebody in that moment like that because not everybody knows what it feels like too. I mean, I feel like that's just a totally different level of support that just to be like, I know you're scared, it'll be okay, like from somebody who just doesn't get it,
Yeah.
but somebody who really actually knows what it feels like to be that, afraid of something. But so,
That is amazing. I mean, lucky her. And it is so just fantastic of you to be able to do that and to share what you've learned to help someone else. It does feel great, doesn't it, to help people?
it does. Yeah.
Such a brilliant thing to be able to do. And I always think that when with the podcast and stuff, I hear about people find it helpful. And I know Pete, when he gave his checklist for everybody, he loves it, thinking that it's all over the world helping people. And the fact you used it with this woman, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. That's
Yeah.
such a great story.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's what this is all about, helping each other, help ourselves to get through this and, and see the world or just conquer our own fears and do the things that we want to do and like celebrate each other as we do it. Like, how cool is that? Right. So I mentioned my therapist that I have, and I just started seeing her before I went on this recent, trip to the Bahamas, which by the way was amazing. It was beautiful. And it was, yeah, it was amazing. But she had asked me as part of like our like get to know you thing. She was like, well, do you have any other like support groups that you participate in? Like this could be anything. Like this could be, I go to yoga or I do like whatever. And I was like, yeah, I'm in a fear of flying group. And we have a podcast and we have a Facebook group and we all support each other and it's really beautiful. And she was like, oh, I've never heard of that. And I was like, yeah, it's great.
Oh, well, it's nice to maybe you should be able to refer it to other people as well. So you've done remarkable, haven't you? You just so what when you just think about yourself now, is it how would you describe yourself in relation to fear of flying?
Like how I feel about it now, or
Yeah. When you talk about yourself in relation to somebody else.
I call myself a recovering fearful.
Oh, okay. So that's I was trying not to give you too much to give the language. I was deliberately trying to be a bit vague to see it. Okay, that's good.
I think it would be a bit bold of me to say I am a recovered fearful flyer. I hope one day to say that I am totally fearless. I will tell you now that I have dreams about flying in airplanes and they're not scary, and that's really cool. And I don't.
It's possible then, isn't it? You imagine it, and it's a possibility.
Yeah. And I don't panic now. I don't have the anticipatory anxiety for days or weeks. I mean, I would not be able to eat for days leading up to flights. I would not be able to sleep. I would, just physically feel ill, but, I don't have that anymore. I think I would describe myself as having like a normal amount of nerves sometimes just leading up to it. And then, when I fly now, I feel like I'm a pretty good, mostly normal flyer, I would say. I think my husband would probably agree with that. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I, I think that there is a lot of hope for anybody who feels like I felt and felt like it was impossible. Um, and that, just consider what lies beyond the fear, because there's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, that's a nice phrase. So, so a couple of things then. So, how do you think you've managed to reduce the anticipatory anxiety? Because this is a big thing for a lot of people, isn't it? The leading up to it. How is that reduced, in your opinion?
So, few different things. One, I really try to redirect my thoughts if they get fixated on flying, find something else to think about, kind of center myself. Okay, I'm not flying right now. Now's not the time to think about this. You can think about it later.
Right.
Kind of thing. Um, I have dabbled a little bit in like some meditation practice that I think is helpful, especially when feeling particularly anxious. I
Mm-hmm.
think it helps sort of center things a bit. I also think that my anticipatory anxiety has just naturally gotten better as I have worked on my fear. So I think some of it has just sort of happened on its own. Um, but I think talking about it to people that are supportive is helpful, you know. And so those are the big things. I feel like just trying to redirect those thoughts when you're feeling really fixated on it. I'm not flying right now. Focus on what I'm doing right now in this moment, and we'll come back to that later.
Yeah, I like that. It's a nice, and that's very usable for anybody listening to this. That's a
Yeah.
nice, simple technique. Easy to explain, not so easy to do in the moment, but it's something that you can keep
Yeah.
doing.
Or if you can't refocus your thoughts on your own, find a brain game on your phone and just pick it up and do it for 10 to 15 minutes. You won't be thinking about flying by the time you're done with it. You'll be thinking about Sudoku or whatever you're playing.
That's a really good tip, actually. So there's been some fabulous stuff, and I love the story of how it's all come sort of full circle. You've ended up helping somebody else on a flight and made it easier for them. What would your kind of final tips be for anybody listening going, oh yeah, yeah, but you're not as bad as me, or I always have this fear, etc., etc. What sort of things might you say to help them?
So I think that it's important to explore what you're afraid of and why. I think knowing the whys and the hows are going to help you heal and grow through things. So, for example, for me, a lot of it had to do with how does this work? What am I hearing? What am
Yeah.
I feeling? You know, I'm not falling out of the sky at, 15,000 feet or whatever. It's noise abatement or, those kind of things. I think that you should focus on what your plan is, but also be prepared for that plan to change. So, be okay with that. There's another fearful flyer support person. I don't know like what the right term would be, but that what?
What?
Nope. Like,
That's it. We're done.
no. Actually, he's in your group too. His name's Adam Brenson, and he shared something with me a long time ago that I thought was super helpful. And it was, I don't know, like the um foundation behind it, but it made a lot of sense to me that he said being afraid of flying is often rooted in either, a lack of trust. Either you don't trust yourself or the pilot or the plane or the process of travel or, one of those kind of things. And so if you kind of break that down and go, okay, well, which one is it? And so for me, I'm like, okay, learning to trust the pilot. And I like to follow and watch pilots on TikTok being like, come with me as I fly around the world. And, be like, just watching them do normal stuff. And it's not about like how scary it is, you know what I mean? And like, they're just as mundane, like another day in the office. Like, make it as like normal as possible. Like, just the thing about it is there's so much information available on the internet to you to like mentally prepare for these kind of things. And like, you know, really just take some of the fear and like anticipation out of it, we could do that. Like I, for a while, was like stalking a Reddit group with flight attendants complaining about passengers. It was just a bunch of flight attendants that would be like, oh my gosh, like, this and that person, like, we're so unreasonable. And my flight route got changed. Or like, what about the, like, whatever they call the places that they stay in the cities that they go to? And I was just like, I love this. Like, they're so normal. Or I have like a good friend of ours. Hi, Rachel, if you listen to this, but a really good friend of ours that used to be a flight attendant before she moved on to the career she's on now. And I used to bother her all the time, like before I would fly, which actually she pointed out before our trip. She was like, oh my God, you didn't even text me or call me or anything about this. And I was like, hey, I didn't. But I love to picture her just like being a flight attendant and like being, like doing stuff because like it's normal. It's not like they're getting up there risking their lives.
Mm.
I think normalizing that is super helpful. Like, no matter what you're afraid of, if you just remember that, like, those people are doing it for hundreds of hours every month, all the time, and they're perfectly safe, and they're not worried, like, that's cool. And you can also tell them, like, when you get on the plane, I religiously did this on my first, like, handful of flights. Get on the plane. They greet you when you get on the plane. Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a nervous flyer. Could you check on me? Well, I actually, like, I think on my first flight, got on the plane and was like, I didn't even say my name. I was just like, I'm really scared. And like that, like, they're really nice about it. I've not encountered anybody that was unpleasant about it. Like, the day I stopped saying this when I got on the airplane was when the flight attendant looked at me and he said, um, that's okay. We're not going to let anything happen to you. And I couldn't think of anything more comforting any of them could say to me. So I just stopped saying it. I just pictured that every time I got on the airplane. But like, they'll check on you, like, they'll make sure that you're okay. Like, they don't want you to be afraid. Um, Learn as much as you can about breath work. If you can control your breathing, you
Yeah.
can keep yourself from going into a full blown panic, no matter how scared you are. And that's super important. Um, so, I mean, I think those are my big ones. And also just remember why you want to do it, because it will be hard. You know, it's, it's definitely something that you have to get through the hard parts of it. If you want to get to the part where you like or love it, or at least don't hate it. And there's many moments, I would think one night, like, I cried all night, like, I just don't want to go, like, but I had to remember, like, there's a reason I want to do this. And right now my brain is trying to trick me, you know, because it's so anxious. Like, your anxiety will hijack your brain if you let it. So you have to remember why. You have to remember that you know how safe you are, no matter how anxious that you feel. And so I don't know. And I kind of rambled on there, but I think those are kind of my big ones that I think are my tips for fearful flyers.
Really good. It's a really nice one there as well. And also the interesting progression from having to tell somebody every time to now, I don't need to. I've got this little thing in my head.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm done. I love that. These are things, because some people have to, they will tell them every single time. They have to tell them. If they don't get the right response, then that's a problem.
Mhm.
These people are just doing their job, and 99% of the time they're going to be amazing, but occasionally you get a grumpy one, and can't give them the power to
Yeah.
control fear, because it's in your ability to do something about it, and it's not down to them to solve it. It's just they're a support network. But I like the fact that you've chosen now. I don't need that anymore. That's
Yep.
really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's progress.
Yeah, it definitely is progress. You're making. So what next? Where then?
Um, well, we have a trip planned with some friends of ours. We're going to go to Puerto Rico. So, that's exciting.
It is.
Probably in the winter.
Yeah.
And then we haven't planned our family trip for next year, but we'll be flying somewhere. I think I need to fly a minimum of every year, but I'd like to fly every 6 months.
Yeah.
Um, Poor me, I have to go on a trip every 6 months, but no, just kidding. Um, but I really do think that for me, I have to maintain that because I worry. at least for now, because it is still kind of early. I mean, it's only been 3.5 years, and
Yeah.
I don't want to backslide at all. I want things to continue with the momentum they've had so far. So I feel like I need to keep flying to do that. So um, that's the plan for now. Puerto Rico in the winter, and we'll see where we go next summer. We don't know yet.
Oh, I love that. Well, you're very welcome to come back and tell us how you get on, and maybe you'll be helping somebody else on the flight. Who knows? That could be a new role.
Yeah, who knows?
Volunteer. Get a little badge on. Once they're flying, talk to me.
Yep. You never know. I mean, I'm a helper by nature, so
Yes.
anything like that, I'm always down to help. So
Yeah, no, brilliant. Oh, well, Sarah, that was fabulous and packed full of sort of really good wisdom and just we get a sense of your determination, but also you've gone about it in quite a practical way. And I think that's just excellent. And I love the story of you helping out the passenger. That's great.
thank you so much.
Done really well. Thank you.
Well,
Now
thank
you're
you. I
part of the
appreciate it.
legacy. Now you're part of the podcast legacy. Your wisdom shall live on with other people.
Well, thank you. I truly think that, a lot of what you do and the content that you've put out has truly helped me move from just being like, well, I can do this, but I'll be afraid, to, abandoning some of those things that I thought I had to do or being afraid and moving more towards, you know, truly what I hope will one day be loving flying. So thank you so much for everything that you do. And thank you for having me on the podcast today.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you. It's been great. You've been a super guest, Sarah. Thank you. I bet your partner's relieved now. You can actually drive.
Oh, he's thrilled. He's having a great time.